Make up mine. Fight.
Paper Mario for the N64 is my favorite game of all time. I'm more intimately familiar with this game than I am with my own mortal human body. And recently, I've been watching a lot of those ranking every boss in blank type videos, so I thought I'd combine the two into a horrible amalgamation of YouTube content. I feel like it's important to note that this isn't a video ranking every boss in the cross-generational series titled Paper Mario, but rather a video ranking every boss in the N64 inaugural game in that series, also titled Paper Mario. It would be an astronomically large task to rank every boss in the series in a single video, and borderline impossible for me since my Wii U gamepad is borked. So we'll be sticking to the original, in my opinion, best Paper Mario game. I real quick want to stress what I'm actually ranking in this video, since the Mario Wiki article listing every boss in this game is a bit misleading. Basically, I'm listing encounters against enemies who either fight only once, or who appear throughout the game and get progressively stronger. I'm choosing not to rank fights against beefed up normal enemies, just groups of normal enemies in the mini-boss theme playing, or battles against mini-bosses that later become normal enemies. I promise you that if I did rank literally every encounter against what the game calls a mini-boss, that things like the Stone Chomps and Bill Blasters wouldn't rank especially high. We're also counting different fights against the same opponent, like Junior Troopa, the Master, and Bowser separately, but I'll be ranking different phases in the same fights, like Tubba Blubba's heart into Tubba Blubba, and the Shy Squad before General Guy as singular bosses. All of those semantics out of the way, let's roll. Honestly, the fact that we're even ranking this is kind of a formality. The prologue of Paper Mario is easily my least favorite part of the game due to how slow and meandering it is, especially since you don't have action commands yet, and the tutorial fight against Junior Troopa is definitely the epitome of this. It's effectively a scripted force win tutorial battle, with the only way it's even possible to come close to losing being to select the do nothing command over and over again. Otherwise, Junior Troopa and Mario spend pretty much the entire fight making Goombas out of each other until a small number of turns is passed. The main thing this fight contributes to the game is introducing us to Junior Troopa, who will go on to have many more much better battles in the game. As a tutorial, it's alright, but as a prologue fight you have to slog through on every playthrough, give me tutorial Bowser any day. If you asked me what the most forgettable fight in Paper Mario is, well, I'd have to look it up because I'd likely have forgotten it, but after I did, I'd definitely tell you Fuzzipede. This is a fight that really aligns with the anything can be a boss and a boss can be fought anywhere mentalities present in Paper Mario 64, and for that reason it's kind of cool, but otherwise it's absolutely nothing special. This is one of the fights in the game where the player is locked solely into using Watt as their party member, which would be a lot more cumbersome if Watt wasn't incredibly broken. Otherwise, the fact that Fuzzipede sticks to the ceiling is a bit annoying, as it locks the player out of a large selection of Mario's abilities, unless you're either using Quake Hammer or are for some reason still rocking Hammer Throw at this point in the game. This fight is also another example of the battle inside a whale genre of video game bosses, which is really common when you think about it. All around, the fight against Fuzzipede isn't terrible or anything, it's just incredibly forgettable and gimmicky. Sorry to have another Junior Troopa fight ranked this low, but Junior Troopa 2 was pretty much a repeat of the first battle, only with Mario having partners and action commands at his disposal this time, and Junior Troopa himself being slightly tankier. Even still, the player has Bombette at this point, and you're on your way back to Toad Town anyways, so just spend up your remaining FP and blast him away. I do like being able to rough him up after the fight though. Mario literally kicks a child while he's down in this game. I'll give the fight against Spike, something. It's not often in these games that the player gets to fight against a future party member. I can really only think of Vivian from TTYD as another example of something like this, and even then, Vivian blows Lackluster out of the water. What we've got here is essentially a fight against a normal Lakitu with about 4 times as much HP. It's virtually impossible to come anywhere close to losing this fight unless you're actively trying, since Lackluster's damage is pretty pitiful and his attack variety non-existent. And don't worry, this will carry over to his time as a party member as well. Overall, this fight has the novelty of fighting a party member on its side, but not much else. Monstar is another example of the whole anything can be a boss thing that I discussed earlier, since what this fight effectively is Mario battling a group of literal babies trying to defend their home. To this end, the fight is a pretty effective bait and switch comedy routine, with Monstar only having a whopping 20 HP and 1 attack power. I like how the game really drills into your head how dangerous and powerful this thing must be, only for the rug to be immediately pulled out from under you as soon as it attacks. Or you attack, since you can literally kill it with 1 power bounce. As a fight though, it's pretty forgettable beyond its novelty, and doesn't do a lot to stack up against the game's other much more memorable encounters. I promise this is the last Junior Troopa fight for a while. I don't mean to keep picking on this kid, he just makes it really easy. Junior Troopa 3 is a bit more complex than the previous encounters due to him having wings, but at this point the player has upgraded party members, especially Parakarry on their side, so they should be fine. I do like how this fight is practically begging the player to use their newly acquired Star Storm ability on him, which has a chance to actually generate a semi-unique reaction from Junior Troopa. A great introduction to one of the most broken attacks in the game, but an otherwise lackluster fight. Putting the red and blue Goomba fight this high on the list might be a bit of a controversial pick, but I respect this fight for essentially being the first time the player has to think a bit in the game. I've previously described Paper Mario's battle system as an elongated game of resource management, as the player has to prioritize outpacing the enemy's damage while using as little resources as possible, and this fight may very well be the first time this mentality is put into practice in the average playthrough. You can blow through all of your flower points immediately with a huge barrage of power jumps, but you only have so much FP to use on them. I also like that the red Goomba has more HP than the blue one, kind of setting in the whole red equals leader thing that the Mario RPGs love so much. Also, they cry when you defeat their partner. Mario out here causing emotional damage from hour 1 of the game. Having any fight against a Master this low on the list must be illegal in some countries, I'm sure, but for me, Master 2 has always been the most forgettable of the fights against him. The first battle will always surprise players attempting to take him on too early, and the final battle is effectively the game's super boss, but this middle battle is ultimately kind of pointless. Not only does it lessen the impact of the Master effectively going Super Saiyan during his final battle, as he's already halfway there here, but in my experience, the player usually ends up doing this fight right before the final Master anyways, so it's just kind of a step in the road on the average playthrough. That said, it's still a Master fight, and his HP and damage can still very much goof you up if you decide to fight him too early or get careless with your resources. It might be my least favorite Master fight, but it's still a Master fight. Blooper 1 is another middle-of-the-road battle against an opponent who's fought multiple times in the game, only this time it's sort of carried by Blooper having an attack or two that may actually catch the player off guard. In this case, it's Blooper's Ink Spray attack, which I found can be a bit tricky to block at times, and I also like the pseudo jump scare that comes from encountering Blooper for the first time. If only it was guarding something better than the Shrink Stomp badge, it might be a bit higher on this list. Big Lantern Ghost is one of the more puzzly bosses in Paper Mario, but I honestly kind of enjoy it in this case. If the player knows to multi-hit the Ghost Lantern with bow and then focus on damage with Mario, the fight is an absolute cakewalk, but if you don't know or don't think to do that, this fight can actually be a bit tricky. He's also capable of damaging your party member, which is consistently one of the most dangerous things that a boss in this game can do. The Ghost additionally guards Watt, who, as I said before, is easily the most broken party member in the game. I also appreciate how legitimately creepy and unexplained its presence in the Shy Guy toy box is, both before and during the fight. Overall, while Big Lantern Ghost battle is a bit gimmicky, it's far from the worst encounter in the game. Here, just outside of the top 20, is our first proper chapter boss for this list, which may sound like heresy, but you'll understand when I tell you that it's just Goomba King. Goomba King definitely has two major things going for him: his personality and the secret hiding behind him in the battle. He's a legitimately funny and goofy character, and the inclusion of the tree that can be attacked to both damage him and immediately take out his adds is really neat and something that I wish the game did more of. However, he's mainly held back by being a prologue boss, and if the fight were a bit more mechanically complex and had action commands available, it'd probably be much higher. Team Goomba's blasting off again. And kicking off our top 20 is the very first battle in the game against Tutorial Bowser. I know this placement might be a bit weird since it's literally a scripted battle that the player can't win, but I just appreciate how cinematic and raw it is, especially in the context of the game's original release. Bowser invades Peach's castle, becomes invincible, damn near kills Mario, and takes control of the Mushroom Kingdom. This is like some big Sonic Forces energy, except nearly 20 years earlier and actually good. I was only 2 when this game released, but I can definitely imagine being a slightly older core Mario fan and seeing my funny picture book Mario game begin with Bowser absolutely mollywopping our hero. It's a type of raw dread that the Mario series doesn't often depict, and for me leaves an incredibly strong impression right at the beginning of the game. At numbers 19 and 18, we have our 2 remaining blooper fights, in order being Electro Blooper and Super Blooper. These battles both have advantages and disadvantages, with Electro Blooper being capable of becoming invincible to jumps from a non-electric Mario, and Super Blooper being able to produce adds that actually linger after the main boss's defeat, and they both represent a decently meaningful challenge depending on when you fight them. For me, though, they're a bit mid and kind of rest in the lower echelons of the game's optional or delayable bosses. Not terrible, just not as good or memorable as some of the later stuff on the list. You definitely want to fight them as soon as possible though, or else you'll be doing a lot of backtracking. Next up is our next main chapter boss, this time being Tootin' Koopa. As a kid, I legitimately thought Tootin' Koopa was kind of spooky and mysterious, especially the cutscene before the battle and his battle theme, but as an adult, I fully realize how much of a schmuck he truly is. He basically spends the entire chapter trash-talking Mario from a distance, but isn't really capable of backing up his words with actions, and the consequences ultimately come to meet him face to face. He's one of the easiest chapter bosses in the game, and if you do a power jump para-carry combo 3 times in a row, you can literally beat him in 3 identical turns. The fact that he summons chomps is a neat touch and can potentially allow for infinite star point grinding very early in the game, but isn't that consequential otherwise. It's incredibly easy to beat him before he even gets a chance to use his magic, and his ability to damage your party members really doesn't matter because of it. Also, this is a little bit of an unscripted ramble, but I want to talk about something with the Mario Wiki. When I was a kid, there was a section of the Tootin' Koopa section of the Mario Wiki that mentioned his identity as a ghost being a mystery, even, quote, in the TV series, which I'd assume was added by someone who was confused or just a straight up troll. But as a kid, it legitimately had me believing that there was some hidden Paper Mario animated series that I had never seen, and I spent months looking for it. I remember that section getting removed pretty quickly, but it was there long enough for me to see it and to dwell on it. So screw you, random 20-year-old Mario Wiki editor. And here we have a much harder Chapter 2 boss, Bazaar. Bazaar is interesting in that it's very easy to die to them if you choose to fight them your first time through Mount Rugged, and they can even pose a meaningful challenge if you fight them on the way back without proper equipment too. Bazaar has a decent mix of attacks that all use the game's action commands in interesting ways, from mitigating to completely avoiding damage, and it's definitely one of the more mechanically complex fights at this point in the game. If you try to take on Bazaar while you're under-leveled, you could very easily find yourself getting overwhelmed, which not many other bosses, let alone optional ones in this game, can say. Returning to the dojo real quick, let's talk about Master 1. This is definitely a gateway fight in the game, as the player can very easily steamroll through both Chan and Lee with very little effort as soon as they're accessible, but if you attempt to take on the Master at this point, I promise you that you'll have a hard time. 50 HP and 6 attack power is pretty huge for a boss who can potentially fight as early as Chapter 1, and even if saved for much later in the game, the first Master fight can act as a good precursor for things to come. He just hasn't powered up and taken off his weighted training gi yet. Our next optional boss on this list is Koopa, an unfortunately visually challenged yet all-around asshole of a Koopa who really rewards experimentation and trying different strategies. One of my issues with Paper Mario is that it showers the player in items and abilities that inflict status ailments to enemies, yet most significant opponents are either resistant or completely immune to them. Koopa, however, is actually incredibly vulnerable to the sleep status and can be made into an absolute joke by exploiting this weakness. I'll always appreciate a boss that rewards trying out different strategies, especially with how rare they are in this game, and allowing the player to soften up an otherwise decently difficult battle through experimentation is always welcome. I also appreciate that his tail has 0 defense, making this a fight that all around rewards game knowledge. If you choose not to exploit his weakness to sleep, Koopa offers up one of the most decently challenging fights in the game, so no matter which way you slice it, I'd say this is a good battle. And back into the toddler bullying sections of this video, Junior Troopa 5 is definitely the definitive fight against Junior Troopa for the first 13 sections of this video. We'll see how it stacks up in the future. This is definitely one of the simpler Junior Troopa fights, as he replants his feet on the ground and favors the Final Fantasy XIV Black Mage strategy of throwing out spells while letting his opponents beat the hell out of him. His health and damage are both decently high, even for Chapter 7, and while I don't think you'll likely lose to him, he's still putting up more of a fight as the game goes on. Also, he freezes to death after you beat him. The Junior Troopas you see after this are clones, the original is dead. I feel like the Koopa Bros are one of the more standout and memorable aspects of the original Paper Mario, and one of the first things that players think of when they think of the game, fitting since they're also the first major boss. For the record, I'm counting the throwaway phase against Dennis Hopper and the main fight against the Koopa Bros as one for this list. The initial phase really isn't anything, basically another throwaway comedy routine, but I've always appreciated the actual fight and how the Koopa Bros themselves get noticeably weaker as you take out individual members of their squad, really helps sell the obviously TMNT inspired unity among them. Also, fun fact, if you bring both a Fire Flower and a POW block to this fight, you can literally kill them all at the same time in 2 turns by using them back to back. Lastly, I really appreciate how they start literally sending hate mail to Mario's house after he beats them, like a transphobe when they see a crossfade transition. It's pretty funny. And for our second to last Junior Troopa fight on the list is the very last one in the game. I really like how Junior Troopa 6 alternates between every form he's used in the game before this. It's a really good showcase of this long, mostly one-sided rivalry, and it's easily the most difficult fight against him. The only reason it's really not higher is, for me, it's always felt a bit anticlimactic, especially with how he just runs off and swears revenge after the fight, and he deprived us of a rematch against the aforementioned hate mail sending Ninja Turtles. Otherwise, this is a great fight and an excellent surprise right before the game's finale. Kicking off our top 10 is another fight against Bowser, this time being Mario's first encounter with him since the prologue. I really appreciate the creepy, ominous, borderline spooky atmosphere this section of the game has leading into the final boss, and getting a rematch against Bowser in the same location as the original fight is a really good bookender. This is effectively a version of the prologue where Mario isn't equipped with the strength of stale spaghetti and has the ability to get over Bowser's cheats, and it really helps showcase that without tricks, Mario is inarguably the stronger of both him and Bowser. It really showcases both Mario's progression throughout the game, as well as giving a nice teaser into final Bowser's abilities. I also really love how Bowser just constantly trash talks throughout the fight and voices his disbelief that Mario is able to turn off his cheats. He's characterized really well. Next up is Lava Piranha, who's a big elephant in the room due to barely working in the Switch version of the game. If you can get past this puzzling technical hiccup though, Lava Piranha is definitely one of my favorite bosses in the game. He really only uses 1 or 2 attacks, but the fight is incredibly multi-layered due to the presence of both the Lava Buds and Petite Piranhas, which adds some very much needed thinking to what would otherwise be a brain-dead fight. And like Kenshi Koopa, this fight rewards game knowledge, with the player being able to stunning both the boss and the ads by using Sushi's water abilities and the ice power badge. While this does trivialize the battle, I'll always welcome the game rewarding experimentation. This fight also double dips on its personality and spectacle, with the double whammy of Colorado attempting to help and the fake out death into phase 2 being extremely memorable. Overall, while Lava Piranha might be simple mechanically, it's a prime example of how gilding the lily can really add to boss fights sometimes. And now is our final, but not the game's final, Junior Troopa fight, being Junior Troopa 4. I know some viewers might be puzzled about why I have this ranked over the final 2 fights, and the reason is twofold. One is that I think the gameplay and story integration of having Junior Troopa be physically tired out from swimming and thus losing HP is extremely funny and a great comedic bit, and also because I legitimately think this can be one of the harder Junior Troopa fights if you don't prepare for it. He's both flying and spiked, meaning that with that spike shield, Mario is pretty much dead weight and you have to rely on your partners to damage him. This is probably why the game cuts his HP in half, but for me, I find it a pretty effective and clever workaround to what could have otherwise been a very frustrating fight. This is also the only fight that uses the Toad Town docks background, which has always been one of my favorite underrated graphical assets in the game. Tubba Blubba is me. He's a big, red-headed, threatening-looking dude who's really just a soft crybaby when you get to know him. He also had his heart ripped out. Very relatable. That said, the fight against Tubba Blubba is one of the best in the game, not only because of its multifaceted nature between the heart and the body, but also because it effectively pays off a mystery present throughout the entire chapter before it. You spend all of Chapter 3 being told not to fight Tubba Blubba due to his invincibility and looking for ways to get over it, and after he's chased you all the way out of his own castle, you finally have your answer. The fight against the heart is another one that rewards game knowledge, as if you try to do this without Bo's Vanish, you're definitely in trouble, and the fight against normal Tubba Blubba after is a very effective swerve, showcasing that despite his size, he's kind of a chump without his cheats. This is not only funny, but also perfectly mirrors Bowser's situation at the end of the game as well. Makes me wonder why Bowser didn't make all of his mooks invincible, but maybe Tubba Blubba was like Garlic Jr. and that he was the only villain smart enough to ask for it. And just missing out on our top 5 is the Crystal King. Now, I love everything about the Crystal King aesthetically. His design, arena, legitimately creepy dialogue, music, all spectacular, and his fight primarily focusing on trickery and light puzzles is really neat. My main reason for not placing him any higher is that he kind of appears out of nowhere and is never mentioned before or after you fight him. For the last main chapter boss before Bowser, that's kind of lame. Aside from that though, it's an exceptional fight and heavily rewards the player's resourcefulness and smart usage of screen wipe attacks. He rocks not only a self-heal, ads, and cloning, but also the ability to freeze Mario and shift between grounded and aerial placements. Alas, if you bring the Feeling Fine badge to this fight, you just win. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Overall, I'd say that the Crystal King is a comfortable top of A tier for this list to gatekeep everything below him from the S tier. Not bad, bootleg Simon. Anti-Guy is the optional boss in Paper Mario, and save for one other contender, would easily be the best non-main story boss in the game. game. The player can actually fight him as soon as they arrive in Chapter 4, but trust me when I say that if you choose to do this, you can prepare to be thoroughly and decisively mollywopped. Anti-Guy has some of the highest damage in the game and the highest non-master health value at the point the player is allowed to fight him in the game, so it's best to heed his warnings and not fight him until you're fully ready. When you finally do get around to fighting him, his battle is effectively just a massively beefed up normal Shy Guy fight, but the sheer numbers advantage he has on the player can be absolutely staggering. He's pretty much right up there with Master 3 as the true final exam for Paper Mario players, and while I personally wouldn't base a YouTube channel around him, he's still an easy top tier boss fight. Also, while I'm not ranking the optional multi-anti-guy fight from Bowser's Castle, rest assured that they would be very high as well if I did. To me, Huff and Puff is what the Crystal King could have been. Despite his goofy design and name, he's a legitimately threatening presence throughout Chapter 6 with very little humor about him, and his battle theme is stellar. He's also mentioned and built up throughout Chapter 6, so getting to fight him feels like a legitimate payoff. He's also probably the hardest and normal chapter boss in the game, as both his damage and ability to regain any health the player knocks off of him if they don't clear up his ads can easily sneak up on you. He has an extremely diverse lineup of attacks and abilities, some of which, like his crash down to the ground and lightning attacks, can be pretty tricky to block, and is all around a step above both everything that came before him and a lot of what comes after him in terms of difficulty in the game. I do wonder what he tastes like though. And as our highest normal chapter boss on the list, I want to sing the praises of a General Guy. To me, this is a prime example of how to mix comedy and a legitimately interesting fight extremely well. The waves of different Shy Guy types and formations he sends out at the beginning of the battle are super funny and varied, and him getting frustrated at their incompetency and stepping in to finish the job himself is a very relatable bit, I'm sure, for anyone who's ever worked a retail job. But what I really love is that it's not just a throwaway comedy bit and that there's still a legitimate boss battle here, just with comedy mixed in. Not only does General Guy's tank rock some decent defense, but if the player doesn't know or doesn't think to attack the light bulb, it can easily pile on some real damage. Again, it rewards game knowledge and quick thinking, and gives the player something to do in the fight other than just pile on damage to the main boss. While it's not the hardest, it's definitely one of the most charming, rewarding, and balanced bosses in the game. Okay, so these last two bosses on the list are pretty interchangeable in our head, but as our runner-up, we have the final master fight. I'll get the elephant in the room out of the way here and just say that using Zap Tap completely trivializes this fight, and that it's the primary reason that he's not number one, but otherwise, this is a goddamn super boss. I fought him for this video using both Zap Tap and not using Zap Tap, and it really changes your perspective to do both. Not only does the master have higher damage output and the same amount of health as the final boss, but his ability to stack on insane damage if not interrupted really makes this a fight like no other in the game. It makes you wonder why Mario doesn't recruit the master into his party and let him make mincemeat out of final Bowser. Also, while I haven't mentioned it in the previous master fights, I love the music that plays over these battles and think that it perfectly complements the self-satirical tropiness on display in them. The master's multi-hitting combo attacks is still one of the deadliest attacks in any Paper Mario game, and the spectacle that it brings is unlike anything else in the game before it. So while he's not number one on our list, there's no question that he is the strongest opponent in Paper Mario. And as for our number one, predictably, is Final Bowser. Look folks, I really wanted to rank it differently, but you just can't argue with the best. This is the fight we've spent the whole game leading up to, and I'd argue that it is one of the most threatening appearances Bowser has ever taken on at this point in the Mario series. Threatening but still goofy Bowser is best Bowser. Once he powers up and reveals that he's now even invincible to Mario's on-command anti-cheat, the fight seems well and truly lost, but luckily we have Peach and an unfortunately named Star Child here to help. While the section with Peach and Twink can kind of drag on repeat playthroughs, I've always appreciated the bit of hope and levity that it brings to an otherwise intense and foreboding fight, and finally getting to lay the smackdown on Cammy, Kara, and Koopa is really satisfying. After Peach's wish has been granted and Mario's gifted the Peach Beam, he can finally take on Bowser for good in what's inarguably one of the best final boss battles in the Mario RPG series. Bowser's attacks are varied and can lay on loads of damage, and really test the resource management skills that the player has learned throughout the game to their fullest extent. While the master was fighting Mario in a friendly sparring match with no consequences, Bowser is shooting to kill, so both him and Mario will be using everything at their disposal to win, including screen wipe, self heals, buffs, buff removal, and everything in between. This battle really does come across as a knockdown drag out, using everything in our skill set kind of desperate battle on both ends, and it really is a Mario v Bowser fight unlike anything else in the Mario series. For that, this is my pick for the best fight in Paper Mario and a great cap off to my all-time favorite game. Great job, King Koopa, now get the hell out of here.